Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
I've been living in this cookie-cutter neighborhood for a while now, and let me tell you, it's been quite the experience. We've got this Homeowners Association, or HOA as everyone calls it, and there's something else. I never thought I'd have so much drama in my life just from owning a house, but here we are. So, this all went down a few years back, but I think it's still pretty relevant for anyone dealing with these kinds of associations. Our HOA, they're like this secret club or something. They have these monthly meetings that us regular folks aren't allowed to attend. Can you believe that? We're paying dues, but we can't even sit in on their little pow-wows. The only time we get to see what's going on is at this annual meeting, but even then it's just about voting for new board members and stuff. Nothing juicy. Most of my neighbors, they're clueless about what the HOA actually does. But I've got this inside scoop, you see. There's this lady who lives next door to me, and she's the treasurer for the HOA. Now, she's not on the board or anything, but she's got access to all the good stuff. And let me tell you, she's not too shy about sharing what goes on in those meetings. It's like having my own personal WikiLeaks right next door. So one day my neighbor comes over all worked up. She starts telling me about this crazy idea the HOA board cooked up in their latest meeting. Get this, they decided they needed to go snooping around in everyone's backyards. Yeah, you heard that right. They wanted to inspect our private property. Now I'm sitting there listening to her, and I'm thinking, what in the world gives them the right to do that? Apparently, they've got these rules about what can be visible in your backyard from the street. Fair enough, I guess. But these nutjobs took that to mean they could just waltz into anyone's yard whenever they felt like it. I asked my neighbor if anyone brought up the whole trespassing issue. I mean, that's got to be illegal, right? Well, according to her, someone did mention it, but you won't believe what the board said. They claimed they have the right to go on anyone's property at any time, just like that, as if they own the place. I mean, come on, but it gets better. My neighbor, bless her heart, she's got some sense. She asked them what would happen if someone's dog bit one of these inspectors, or if a pet got out when they were opening gates and fences. You know what they said? For the pets running away, they said it wasn't their problem because they should be secured onto the property. As for getting bit by a dog, they said they'd sue the homeowner. Can you believe the nerve of these people? Now, here's where things get interesting, and where I think a lot of people need to pay attention. There's a big difference between criminal and civil law, especially when it comes to property rights. After I heard about all this, I did some digging. Turns out those CC&Rs, that's covenants, conditions, and restrictions for those who don't know, don't actually give board members the right to trespass or invade your privacy whenever they feel like it. So, I decided to take action. I wasn't about to let these power-tripping HOA board members think they could just come onto my property whenever they wanted. I went ahead and criminally trespassed all of them from my property. Yeah, you heard that right. I made it crystal clear that they were not welcome on my land without my express permission. You should have seen their faces when they found out. They were all shocked and offended, like I was the one doing something wrong. But here's the thing, I was well within my rights. Just because you're on an HOA board doesn't mean you get to ignore basic property laws. This whole experience really opened my eyes to how these HOAs operate. They often try to overstep their bounds, counting on the fact that most homeowners don't know their rights or are too intimidated to speak up. But let me tell you, it pays to know your rights and to stand up for yourself. Since then, I've become a bit of an unofficial neighborhood watchdog when it comes to HOA overreach. I've been sharing my story with anyone who'll listen, trying to educate my neighbors about their rights. It's amazing how many people just assume the HOA can do whatever they want because it's in some document they signed when they bought their house. But here's the thing, those documents, they're not above the law. They can't give anyone the right to break into your property or violate your privacy. It's important to remember that an HOA is just an organization, not some all-powerful entity that can ignore basic legal principles. I've had quite a few neighbors come to me for advice since then. Some of them have had their own run-ins with the HOA, trying to enforce ridiculous rules or demanding access to private property. Each time I tell them the same thing. Know your rights, stand your ground, and don't be afraid to push back. It's not always easy, mind you. These HOA boards, they can be pretty persistent. They'll try to intimidate you, maybe even threaten fines or legal action. But in my experience, most of it is just hot air. Once they realize you know your rights and you're not backing down, they tend to back off. Of course, I'm not saying all HOAs are bad. I'm sure there are some out there that do a good job of maintaining the neighborhood without overstepping their bounds. But from what I've seen and heard from others, a lot of them seem to attract people who just love having a little bit of power over their neighbors. Since my standoff with the HOA, things have changed a bit in our neighborhood. Word got around about what I did, and it seems to have emboldened some of the other residents, who started demanding more transparency from the board, insisting on open meetings and better communication about decisions that affect all of us. It hasn't been an easy fight, let me tell you. There's been a lot of resistance from the old guard on the board. They're not too happy about giving up their little fiefdom, but slowly but surely, we're making progress. We've even managed to get a few new members elected to the board who are more in tune with what the residents actually want. Looking back, I'm glad I took a stand when I did. It would have been easier to just go along with it, to let them do their inspections and hope they didn't cause any trouble. But that's not the kind of person I am, and it's not the kind of neighborhood I want to live in. I've learned a lot through this whole experience. I've learned about property laws, about the limits of HOA authority, and about the importance of community engagement. But most of all, I've learned that it's always worth standing up for what's right, even if it means rocking the boat a little. So, if you're dealing with an HOA that's trying to overstep its bounds, remember my story. Don't be afraid to push back. Know your rights, do your research, and stand your ground. It might not be easy, but it's worth it. After all, your home is your castle, and no one, not even an HOA, has the right to invade it without your permission. And hey, if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, feel free to use my tactic. There's nothing quite like the look on an HOA board member's face when they realize they've been officially trespassed from your property. It's a small victory, but sometimes those are the sweetest ones of all. Our first and only HOA living situation. Moved into an end-unit townhouse. The second day, a guy from the board came round and started telling us what to do. DH turned to him and said, "I got my lawyer to read the documents before we purchased our unit. You are talking bollocks. Now back off and go bully someone who doesn't know any better." He left. I ran into a something on the edge of this when improving my childhood home for my mom to sell. HOA wanted to inspect the very edge of the backyard 200 feet from the road because I stacked firewood too neatly, and they insisted I built a structure. Back edge of our property was a heavily forested flood zone, with estate homes 1/4 mile back, gated, one road, and 24/7 manned armed security. So basically, my elderly mother got harassed within 2 months of her husband's death of stacking firewood too neatly. HOAs and many people are the worst. No, there was nothing else contributing, except they stayed in the neighborhood too long. This anecdote highlights a common misunderstanding about property boundaries and pet containment. When the neighbor claimed that your sweet but energetic dog had attacked him, it immediately raised questions about the circumstances of the alleged incident. Your response, informing him about the electric fence keeping your dog at least 5 feet from the driveway, was both clever and revealing. By pointing out this crucial detail, you effectively turned the tables on the accuser. If the dog had indeed made contact with the neighbor, it would mean he had trespassed onto your property, crossing the invisible boundary set by the electric fence. This subtle yet powerful counterargument not only defended your pet, but also exposed the neighbor's potential misconduct. The situation underscores the importance of clear communication between neighbors and the need for awareness of property lines and pet containment systems. It also serves as a reminder that accusations should be carefully considered, as the full context of a situation can often reveal unexpected truths. In this case, what began as an accusation against your dog inadvertently became an admission of the neighbor's own questionable behavior. I never thought I'd be in this mess with my HOA. It all started a few months back when I noticed a section of my fence was looking pretty rough. You know how it goes. One day everything's fine and the next, you've got a fence that looks like it's been through a war. I figured, no big deal, I'll just put in a work order with the HOA to get it fixed up. I mean, that's what they're there for, right? So I filled out all the paperwork, dotted my I's and crossed my T's, and sent in the request to have this section of the fence repaired. It was on a shared line, so I thought for sure the HOA would cover it. No sweat off my back, just a simple repair job. Well, let me tell you, nothing's ever simple when it comes to HOAs. I waited, and waited, and waited some more. Months went by, and I started to wonder if they'd even received my request. I was about ready to follow up when finally I saw a truck pull up outside my house. Some contractor the HOA had hired was there to look at the fence. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured he'd just patch up the section I'd mentioned in my work order and be on his way. Boy, was I wrong. This guy didn't just repair the section I'd asked about. No, he went ahead and replaced the entire fence line. The whole dang thing. Now I'll admit, at first I was kind of impressed. I thought, wow, the HOA's really going above and beyond here. I mean, sure, I only asked for a repair, but hey, a brand new fence, that's even better, right? And I assumed it would all be covered by the HOA since they're the ones who approved the work order. So, life went on. I enjoyed my shiny new fence, thinking I'd gotten a pretty sweet deal out of the whole thing. But you know what they say about things that seem too good to be true. Fast forward a few more months. I'm sitting at home minding my own business when I get this envelope in the mail from the HOA. I open it up thinking it's probably just some newsletter or something. But no, it's a bill. And not just any bill, a $1,300 bill for part of the fence replacement. I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw that number. $1,300 for a fence I didn't even ask to have replaced. I couldn't believe it. According to this bill, the part of the fence that isn't on a shared line, the part I'm apparently responsible for, that's what they were charging me for. Now, I'm not one to just roll over and accept things like this. I dug out my HOA agreement and started reading through it. And yeah, there it was in black and white. I'm responsible for the non-shared portion of the fence. But come on, I never asked for that part to be replaced. I put in a work order for a repair on the shared section, not a full replacement of the whole fence line. I was fuming. How could they just go ahead and do all this work without even talking to me first? No quote, no approval, nothing. Just one day, poof, new fence, and now a massive bill to go with it. I decided to reach out to the HOA and try to sort this out. I mean, surely they could see how ridiculous this was, right? I spent hours crafting an email trying to explain my side of things without coming across as too angry. Even though I was plenty angry, let me tell you. Their response, cold as ice. They basically told me, tough luck, I'm responsible for that part of the fence. End of story. No consideration for the fact that I never asked for or approved this work. No acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, they should have consulted me before replacing a section of fence I'm apparently on the hook for. I went back and forth with them over email for days. Each time I tried to appeal to their sense of fairness, to explain how this whole situation seemed completely unreasonable. But it was like talking to a brick wall. They just kept repeating the same things over and over. The HOA agreement says I'm responsible, so I have to pay. At this point, I was starting to feel pretty hopeless. I mean, what options did I have left? I couldn't afford to hire a lawyer to fight this. That would probably cost more than the fence bill itself. And the HOA made it clear they weren't going to budge an inch. I started losing sleep over this whole mess. Every night I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling trying to figure out how I was going to come up with $1,300. That's not exactly pocket change, I've got bills to pay, mouths to feed. This fence fiasco was threatening to throw my whole budget out of whack. I tried talking to some of my neighbors about it, hoping maybe they'd had similar experiences or might have some advice. But most of them just shrugged it off. That's just how HOAs are, they'd say. You gotta read the fine print. Easy for them to say when they're not the ones staring down a surprise $1,300 bill. The worst part was, every time I looked out my window and saw that new fence, I felt a twinge of anger. What should have been a nice improvement to my property had turned into this constant reminder of how powerless I felt against the HOA. I even considered trying to remove the new fence and put the old one back up out of spite. But of course, that would probably just land me in even more hot water with the HOA, plus I'd be out even more money. It felt like I was trapped, with no good options left. As the days went by, my frustration just kept growing. I started to resent every aspect of living in an HOA community. The manicured lawns and tidy houses that I used to appreciate now just seemed like a facade, hiding the ugly reality of dealing with an inflexible bureaucracy. I found myself daydreaming about selling my house and moving somewhere without an HOA. Somewhere I could make decisions about my own property without fear of surprise bills or arbitrary rules. But of course, in this housing market, that wasn't exactly a realistic option either. The deadline to pay the bill was looming closer, and I still hadn't figured out what to do. I thought about trying to negotiate a payment plan with the HOA, but given how uncooperative they'd been so far, I didn't have much hope for that idea. I even considered reaching out to local media, thinking maybe if I could get some attention on this issue, the HOA might back down. But then I worried about potential retaliation. What if they decided to make my life even more difficult if I went public with this? In the end, I felt like I was out of options. It seemed like no matter what I did, I was going to end up having to pay this bill. The unfairness of it all was eating me up inside. But what could I do? Fight it and risk even more fees and headaches, or just suck it up and pay, even though it felt like I was being robbed? As I sat there, staring at that bill for what felt like the 100th time, I couldn't help but feel defeated. This whole experience had left a bitter taste in my mouth. What was supposed to be a simple fence repair had turned into this nightmare that was costing me money I didn't have and peace of mind I couldn't afford to lose. I realized that this was probably just the beginning. If the HOA could do this once, what was to stop them from pulling something like this again in the future? Every time I got a letter from them now, I'd be opening it with dread, wondering what new surprise expense or rule they were going to spring on me. In the end, I had to dip into my savings to pay the bill. It hurt, both financially and emotionally. I felt like I'd been taken advantage of, like my trust in the system had been completely shattered. But what choice did I have? The alternative seemed even worse. As I wrote out that check, I couldn't help but feel like I was giving up a piece of my autonomy, along with my money. It was a harsh lesson in the realities of HOA living, and one I wouldn't soon forget. Now, every time I look at that fence, I don't see a home improvement. I see a $1,300 mistake, a reminder of my powerlessness against the HOA. It's changed the way I view my home, my neighborhood, even my neighbors. I can't help but wonder if they've all had similar experiences, if we're all just silently putting up with these injustices because we feel like we have no other choice. I guess the moral of the story is, be careful what you wish for. A simple request for a fence repair turned into this whole ordeal that's left me poorer, more stressed, and a lot more cynical about HOA living. If I had known then what I know now, I might have just left that old fence alone, even if it was falling apart. At least then, I'd still have $1,300 in my bank account and a lot less gray hair. I understand that you are annoyed and your sense of justice has been violated, but it's only $1,300, or about 4 hours of attorney billing. The path of least resistance is probably to pay and move on, and maybe join the HOA board to stop this in the future. I'm in a similar position. The HOA asked us to fix something and we did, and then they didn't like how we fixed it, so they ordered us to fix it again. We went the retain a lawyer and send a letter route. That only upset the HOA even more. We are now literally suing the HOA. Our attorney is confident that we will win, but it's crazy expensive, and it will only get more expensive. The cost of our exterior renovation was $20 to $25K, so a lot more than you are dealing with. If we lose our lawsuit, we are probably looking at $70,000 in legal fees, plus another $20 to $25K to make the repairs. Again, even if we win, we might have been better off financially. That is, spent less than $20,000. But it has been a lot of stress and time, and we might lose. There is a reason this sub exists. HOAs are ridiculous. The only way to win a game with an HOA is to not play at all. HOA lawyer territory. Do the bylaws say or suggest they can order it or not? Can they order arbitrary new items, which are ostensibly part of your responsibility, to be in conformity with stated community standards and bill you even if you were not out of compliance? Can they decide to hire a gardener without your consent or even knowledge for $10,000 to mow your private lawn to the regulated height, even if it already was, and that guy was already mowing the common areas, and then bill you for mowing you didn't want or need? I would think you have to hire someone to do it if it doesn't say they can. They can't just hire the HOA president's brother to replace your fence for $50,000 and then just send you a bill. But someone with expertise in HOA law in your jurisdiction should advise you here. If it were me, I'd rather pay that money to a lawyer to resist than have the HOA decide they can just do things without consent and bill me.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.